Pum, this is our voice note and we are in episode 4. And on this episode we feature Megan of the Spelling Life podcast. You wanna find about Megan? Find about the Spelling Life podcast? Stick around here and find all about it on this episode. Enjoy it. Hey Megan, how you doing?
Hey coach, I'm doing good, I'm doing great. Nika Salama, how are you?
I am well. Kindly introduce yourself and all that you do.
Yeah, sure. My name is Mutheu. I am a podcaster, a writer, a script writer, and a mental health advocate.
Tell us more about the Spelling Life podcast and why that name.
So the Spelling Life podcast is the podcast I run where we do all things wellness and emotional well-being, or rather all things that would contribute to your mental and emotional well-being. And yeah, we tend to have conversations that would change mentalities or shift your perspective one episode at a time. And why the name is because when I was thinking about what to call this podcast, I was really thinking about my core niche, which is all things mental health, especially because I figured out with things like that, especially in life in general, you have to slowly learn things before you're able to full on, conquer them or look at them differently. Like every day is a learning process. And I thought about baby class and how when you're young, you have to start learning things from the very basics of vowels and consonants before you're able to get to the point where you can now be able to spell things and do dictation. And with every given class, the dictation is always different. The words you're spelling are always different, but the foundation has always built you for these specific differences in terms of classes. And that's the same thing with life. As you continue to debunk and unpack things, it prepares you, and it also gives you like a fortitude to be able to just go through life at whatever level you will be in. So yeah, that's why we called it, or I called it, the Spelling Life podcast.
Take us through the journey and the meaning behind the purple color.
So the journey of my baby, we began, I began the podcast in 2022. Yes, last year. We actually recently celebrated our 1-year anniversary, and we began it in September 2022 with a friend of mine and a couple of other friends on board as well. And it was a beautiful start because I remember these people really helped me just get into it instead of just keep on postponing and saying I'll start. But these people really helped me just get into it. And yeah, after that we did season 1 together. Season 2, I now introduced a different set of hosts, and now it turned from a 2 to a 4 host podcast, and we have been doing that since. Yeah, why the color purple is because purple has always been a color I find warm. It's even like when you do research, purple has this vibe of trust, reliability, and compassion. So I really took time to think about what color I wanted to be the core of my podcast. So I just ended up going with pink and purple because they feel like such feel good colors, Yeah, but mostly purple.
What are some of the challenges that you face as a podcaster and how do you manage them?
What challenges do I face as a podcaster? Let me see. Well, there's quite a lot. There are days when there's imposter syndrome. There are days when you feel like what you're doing isn't really worth it. There are days when tech will fail on you. There are days when the edits will fail on you. There are days when even the edits will be delivered to you, but you won't exactly feel super excited about them. Not even excited, call it more or less like confident, like thinking that maybe your audience is going to have a problem with it or not feel oddly satisfied by what you have created. there's overthinking, there's post-production stress, there's quite a lot of challenges I face. And yeah, how do I manage them? So for things that are coming from within, I like imposter syndrome, like self-doubt, like questioning the content we're about to release, of fear of how the content will be received, or when you remember there's something you said and you wish you didn't say. Yeah, those ones I just really call myself for a meeting, and I remind myself that, there's a greater good as to why I'm doing this podcast, and more or less the messages and the affirmations and the responses I get from people about what an episode has done to them really keep me going on these days. Yeah, as for the content part, sometimes, because it's so funny, I don't know how to explain, and also don't want to overshare. But sometimes when I really need to solidify that all is well, I have like a group of people that will go through my content first and then give me honest feedback on what it looks like, just in case it's just a missing. And from there, we just go about them. Other than that, I don't think I have experienced very big major challenges, because every time I have a team that is working with me, or that I am working with, there's seamless transition from season to the next, so it never really feels like so much to do. But also sometimes, Pia, there's so much happening in your life that will now contribute to inconsistency, especially if you guys work as a team. So how we deal with that is, you just work with what you can. If today there's only two people on set, that's what we'll work with. If tomorrow all of us are in, great. So we have decided to no longer be taking breaks because of say unavailability or life and all of that. So yeah, I remember I saw something on Mina Mind's status one day, I mean story, and he'd written, create seasons, plan and prioritize. No, plan, prioritize, and then create seasons. And that's exactly what we do with that specific bit. Yeah,
Who are some of the people that inspire you?
one of the people that inspire me in the podcasting world very recently has been Stephanie Nganga. Oh, Shari, the babe, is doing so many great things with the SNS, and I am learning so much, even about myself as a host. She's doing an amazing job. I've learned so much from just being part of the people that keep tabs with the SNS. Obviously by default, 100 and Ben from the Gerard podcast. That one goes without question. Sharon K for sure. Some other podcasts I interact with that's not in the country. It's called For Sure Pod, and definitely Adele. Adele, especially because she's really been helping me to just get out of my cocoon, be more authentic, be more real, be more transparent on my podcast, because Adele is also doing a really good job. Yeah.
Passionate about mental health. How do you take care of your mental space as a creative?
I am very passionate about mental health. So I really take time, or I really value my mental health above all else. And I do have my days. Like, I'm not going to sit and say I don't have days where my mental health sort of goes downhill, but I really love to take breaks, especially when I've had burnouts, because sometimes also my mental health takes a toll on me when I'm very overwhelmed and burnt out. So rest for me is very important. I'm very quick to say, leo stoki, leo sifanyi kitu, today I'm just going to journal and, be within myself, listen to good music, do something for myself. And yeah, I really much take up rest and breaks. um Community is also one of the ways that really helps me foster my mental health when things are crumbling. And the beauty of community is these are people you can be very honest with, and these are people who also Pierre God has tasked with the will to just want to be there for you. So when this community is around, you're able to just feel, especially because now me, words of affirmation do a lot to me. So my community will pour and pour and pour and pour till I'm now able to just, rise again. Yeah, this is to say talk to someone, don't go through it alone. And yeah. What keeps me going?
What keeps you going and what's the future of the podcast?
What keeps me going is the sole reason. As in every time I feel like I should just quit, I go back to the sole reason as to why I began the podcast in the first place. I go back to the messages I've gotten from people. I go back to how there's someone that is always waiting for an episode release, even if it's just one. And I don't know what they might need in whatever season they're in. So these things keep me going in terms of the podcast. And yeah, also when you realize that God has placed in you a certain burden and a certain passion for certain things, you hold on to that because God doesn't just plant things by mistake. Yeah, I could say that's quite much it. The future of the Spelling Life podcast is in the hands of God. No, but jokes aside, but also that's not a joke. But in reality, I'm placing myself at a place where I'm allowing, God to just do his thing with the podcast. But definitely the future of the Spending Life podcast is going to be impactful, is going to be wholesome, is going to be, we're looking to have so many things happening, especially stay tuned for season 4 and 5. We have a very new thing we're going to be trying in season 4 and 5. So the future of the Spelling Life podcast is very promising. Did we mention we got our very first nomination? And it was crazy. It was crazy. It was a dream. And, it's the first of many. And that for us was a tap on the shoulder. It was an affirmation that there's so many other great and bigger things for the Spelling Life podcast awaiting us. So yeah, stay tuned. Watch this space. Watch the pace on God, of course.
Any piece of advice to someone who wants to start podcasting?
Um, Piece of advice to anyone feeling like they need to start a podcast: don't sit on it. Just start. Because the more you keep on giving yourselves reasons to postpone and procrastinate, it will take longer than you intend on it to. Just start. And one thing that I learned when I was starting is it's not that serious. It's your very first it's your very first step. And it's not the first step that matters, it's where this step is going to lead you to. So it doesn't have to be all perfect. The sound system doesn't have to be great. In fact, it doesn't even need to have videos. Just start with whatever it is you have, being it just a microphone, being it just your phone. Just start with whatever it is you can manage to start. And as you grow, then now you will also grow even in terms of, you say, production and all of that. Yeah. Also establish your niche, establish what it is you want to talk about, establish why exactly you even began that podcast in the first place, because these are the things that will guide you, especially on this when you sort of like lose touch with your podcast, or on days when you're questioning and second guessing why you began, is always going to be something that will hold you together. Yeah.
Kindly plug yourself.
Spelling Life podcast, rather, the Spelling Life podcast on Spotify, on YouTube. We finally began YouTube, yay! On YouTube, on Google Podcast, on what else? On Anchor, which is not Spotify for podcasters. We're not on Apple Music as of yet, but we're working on it. My blog, you can find it on the link on my Instagram. My Instagram, my Instagram is at Megan Mutheu. No, actually, at what? At, I don't know if where the underscore and the dots are exactly, but Megan Mutheu. In case you don't find me,